Hello and welcome to LEAD Presents School EdTech Solving India's Core Education Problem, partnered by ET Now. Schools globally are facing an uphill battle, whether it be with respect to combating learning deficits, infusing digital technology into their pedagogy, or revising curricula to maximize learning outcomes. Schools can and must reimagine the classroom. But what role will EdTech play in making that vision a reality? And how can we better equip next-gen India for what the future might hold? It's a complex question and it deserves to be approached from a 360-degree perspective. Unfortunately, I'm joined by a highly distinguished panel of subject matter experts to help me do just that. We have with us Sumit Mehta, co-founder and chief executive officer, LEAD; Shaheen Mistry, CEO, Teach for India and founder, Akanksha Foundation; Major Harsh Kumar, Secretary, National Council of Education, Research and Training; and Radhika Agarwal, Investment Team, Media, E-Commerce and EdTech, Bloom Ventures. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us, and a very warm welcome to our audience as well for joining us live. Now, my first question to kick off the conversation, and I come to you with this, Sumit, what do you consider to be some of the leading challenges in the existing Indian education ecosystem? And with the emergence of 4 recent education unicorns in the space, are we now beginning to chip away at those challenges at the pace and at the scale required?
India has the twin challenges of both width of good education and depth. Let's address the width. Good quality education is just not available to all the students, and it's left to the accident of birth. So if you are born in a metro to a rich family, you get access to good education. But if by chance you're born in a small town or in a low-income family, the quality of education precipitously drops. And if India has to become a superpower, then every child needs access to good quality education, which is not happening. And then the other problem is the depth, because we define quality education very narrowly and in a very shallow manner, because we've reduced it to academic exam scores.
Sure.
There was a survey recently, I think last year, which said that students who were board toppers, they were asked and they said that one consistent feedback, that their school education did not prepare them for success in life. So this narrow definition of quality education and this unavailability of quality education to all children, I think these are the 2 big challenges in education today before we go into the tactics and the operating issues. And you mentioned the 4 unicorns. I think it's a proud moment for Indian EdTech that they've put Indian EdTech on the global map. They've achieved commercial success. But my belief is that we can't bring transformation to the level of depth and width that we need in India if we don't transform our schools.
Sure.
Because a child spends 6 hours in a school every day, and the whole child transformation that's possible in a school, without that, we can't make the deep impact and to solve the challenges that are required.
Absolutely. And I'll come to you now, Shaheen. Now that we've understood some of the bottlenecks that the Indian education ecosystem is facing, what are some of the specific challenges that our schools are battling? And what's the solution in your view?
Yeah, thank you for that. Such a difficult last 2 years for children and for teachers. And at Teach for India, we work with some of the lowest income children across our urban areas. So the problems are even more pronounced. I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunity and challenge together, Pooja, because I think the opportunity right now, building on what Sumit said, is to reimagine the purpose of education, to say education has to be about the whole child, and education has to be about setting a child up to live a happy life, to live a purposeful life, in addition to getting a livelihood. Education also has to be about the way we interact with each other, the respect we show each other, the love we show each other. And lastly, education has to be about making the country and the world a better place.
We'll move on. And Radhika, I'm going to pose my next question to you. So India's education system is valued at upwards of $100 billion. Yet in many ways, we still seem to be just scratching the surface. So in your view, where do the most promising, untapped market opportunities lie?
I think first off, thanks for having me. And you're absolutely right. We're now at EdTech crossing, or education overall crossing about 100 billion, most of which has come from K-12 curricular education, from test prep, partly from job prep. But really, we're only scratching the surface, as you said. And the beauty of EdTech, and that's the joy of EdTech investors as well, is the more products you build, the market size kind of just expands organically from that. So really, supply of product is creating demand as well. What we've been seeing as big opportunity areas that we're super excited about right now are, I think, one, also taking from what Smith mentioned earlier, post-COVID, the way schools are seeing a big change in how they operate as well. And the same thing happening with colleges as well. So we're seeing big opportunities for tech and startup players to work with schools and colleges. Even smaller elements of it, like how do you make homework move online? How do you make even things like parent-teacher meetings move online? Can't, of course, in the long run expect classrooms to be online, but how do you bring in third-party technology better into schools and colleges to improve teaching outcomes, learning outcomes, pedagogy? That's one. The second is a lot more focused now on early learning. So K-12 and test prep typically moved focus on students above, say, sixth to eighth grade, where your foundation learning and then test prep kicks in. We're now looking at a lot more education products for kids below the age of 10, both in terms of what you kind of constitute as tier 1A India, where it's more of a global product. It could be the use of AR, VR, it could be the use of toys that help not just with education, but also the emotional intelligence, but also what we call kind of catch-up services in that age group. So kids of maybe parents who don't speak English or didn't grow up speaking English, and how do you bring them at the same level as a kid who's grown up in a metropolitan city in terms of how they speak? Because in the long run, that itself also has several outcomes. And then the last opportunity we're seeing is kind of the other end of the spectrum in terms of age, where typically middle management employees or people in their 30s, early 40s, in terms of leadership coaching, management potential, kind of helping them come into the next layer of becoming leaders in their organizations as well. So I think more from an upskilling perspective is another opportunity that we're seeing right now.
All fascinating points, Radhika, and I'd love to build on some of your comments and come back to Major Kumar here. And so, my question to you, which is essentially the question I'd asked just moments ago, was about sort of poor teaching methodologies that may exist in the system, and that the impact that they have on student performance is both catastrophic from a short-term and a long-term perspective. So how can we work towards ensuring that our teachers are equipped for the role? Major, over to you.
अभी मैंने सुना, अभी मैम बोल रही थी, राधिका मैम शायद, कि कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है कि अगर आप एजुकेशन सिस्टम को केवल लैंग्वेज से जोड़ करके देखें कि अंग्रेजी में बोलना ही सफलता का द्योतक है
जी।
सर्वप्रथम। और इस बार हमारी शिक्षा नीति में लैंग्वेज को बहुत महत्व दिया गया है, क्योंकि बच्चे अपनी लैंग्वेज में सबसे ज़्यादा सीखते हैं। इसीलिए इनिशियल ईयर्स ऑफ एजुकेशन के बारे में लैंग्वेज पे महत्व दिया गया है। और दूसरा, अगर आप राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति को देखें तो इसमें इन सारी बातों को ध्यान रखा गया है कि अभी तक अर्ली चाइल्डहुड केयर और एजुकेशन पे ज़्यादा ध्यान नहीं दिया गया था। अब हम इसको भारतीयता से जोड़ करके इसको देख रहे हैं कि किस प्रकार हम इसमें टेक्नोलॉजी को भी इंक्लूड करें।
Well, Major, we ask that you stay with us because we have several other questions lined up for you later on in the panel discussion, but some very inspiring words there. And that actually makes for a nice segue to my next question, which is to you, Sumit. And as we're looking to address some of the existing bottlenecks in the Indian education ecosystem, what are some best practices that we can perhaps pick up from our counterparts abroad?
I think India is a unique country and it is a diverse country. So we have a lot of local knowledge and, as Major Harsh was saying, traditional knowledge. But I think if we have to truly become a global superpower, it will be good to draw inspiration from those countries who are doing well from well-recognized benchmarks. So I'll give you an example of how at LEAD we have built the curriculum and pedagogy. Of course, NCERT in India sets up the basic grade level outcomes. But if you look at some of the high-performing PISA countries like Singapore, Ontario, Hong Kong, there's a lot to learn in terms of curriculum and pedagogical approaches. And I think if we are able to bring them in, but what's important is to contextualize them for the unique needs of our country and not just blindly replicate.
Sure.
And then the other part is, when we think about education transformation, curriculum pedagogy is just two pieces of the puzzle. it's a complex solution. So you have to also look at school systems. So there are countries which have similar context to India, where private and public delivery of education coexist. And if you look at those countries, there the integrated systems on which schools run, those are interesting systems that we can bring to India and then contextualize. So I think if we can do a mix of both, which is leverage our local traditional knowledge and then mix it with some of the global best practices after contextualizing them, then I think we'll have a really robust system that can propel the country forward.
Absolutely. And I think that's all a matter of opinion. But, Shaheen, I want to ask you to respond to some of Sumit's observations. And I also wanted to get your view on the national education policy. And to what extent do you believe that it's had a meaningful impact?
Let me first share that similarly, one of my favorite things in the world is going into classrooms, and I've had the great fortune of visiting classrooms around the world. But when you look across thousands and thousands of classrooms, you're actually finding great teachers behaving in ways that mimic great leaders, interestingly. And if you were to break that down, a great teacher connects deeply with their kids. They know their children really, really well. A great teacher envisions, along with not just students, but parents and others. A great teacher plans not for a classroom, but for individual children in a classroom, Absolutely. Knowing that they're all different and success is different. A great teacher executes effectively and relentlessly. I've seen children being so excited about their chapter books that they're falling off their seats or walking to the bathroom, continuing to read their chapter book. And a great teacher really reflects on their own practice. And I think what I've come to believe is that the NEP, I think the NEP is a beautiful, beautiful aspirational document. My feeling reading through it was, can I even name 10 schools, not just in the country, but around the world, that actually embody, there is so much that is aspirational in the NEP, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the individual people.
Major, I'd love to turn to you now here, and I'd love to turn the conversation towards technology. So what more can the government do to better incentivize the adoption and the deployment of future-ready EdTech initiatives, in your view?
Government is doing a lot in this. There has been a process which has started for building up infrastructure in distant villages. And that is obviously, as I said, it is not going to come in one day. But then how to reach to the last school, to the last children, to the last kid, to the last student.
Right.
Government is definitely planning on that. NCRT, like I told you, that we are going for community radio, where right now there is no infrastructure available. We are going for free to air, and as I told you earlier, channels has already been launched for class 1 to 12, 24 hours channels are going. Then there are plans for interactive sessions with the children of the villages, or we have to make a cluster kind of a thing, a cluster schooling kind of a thing in small places. So there are many plans which are going, and we are working towards it. And it will take some time, but then I think it will come up. And it will come up in a way, because it is going in a planned manner, in a mission mode.
Oh, absolutely, Major. And all of that optimism is very heartening to hear, of course. And Radhika, I take my next question to you. And I'd love your view on whether you believe that EdTech in schools has become sort of a knee-jerk reaction to this pandemic, or do you believe the trend is here to stay?
Funnily enough, both. I do think to a large extent the extent of EdTech we're seeing in schools today in India wouldn't have happened without the pandemic. Teachers and students and school admin being forced into going into an online mode fairly instantaneously towards the end of March 2020 was interesting, because that's not, unfortunately, teachers are not yet in most schools in India trained enough in tech and to teach online to be able to adapt that to that world very quickly. At the same time, almost 2/3 of your student population is too young to be able to adapt to tech themselves without kind of parental intervention. So yes, bit of a knee-jerk reaction over there. So we do expect this kind of hybrid move to teaching offline, but everything else online will also improve learning outcomes significantly.
Phenomenal, Radhika. Please, Sumit.
We are seeing on the ground, we
Sure.
partner with schools, and as the second wave has ebbed and schools are slowly reopening, we are seeing a seminal shift in school owners thinking, and I'm talking about private schools, affordable private schools. There's a seminal shift where school owners have realized that they cannot continue their traditional analog approach of running schools, which was in registers and lists and stuff. So they've got to embrace technology, because one thing which COVID did was it made them realize that they were sitting ducks for disruption. When within 2-3 weeks, if they had to move online, and they just did not have the wherewithal to do it. So as they are coming back, it's once bitten, twice shy. We are currently seeing school adoption at 4-5x the rate, and I'll give you some numbers. Currently we are getting schools like 300 odd schools adopting us every month, which used to be like 70-80 just pre-COVID.
Well, Sumit, I have a follow-up question for you, and this may be a question on the mind of many parents. How do you believe EdTech in schools is going to impact the cost of education going forward?
Well, I have seen this myself. I think school EdTech has a massive potential to actually democratize excellent education for every child. And why do I say that? I think if the 6 hours in schools, you can ensure that the child is learning, and as Shaheen said, the whole child is learning, you can actually take away the need for tuitions and extra classes. I'll give you a couple of examples. There are some consumer EdTech companies who offered a coding program, which was from some 20,000-30,000 rupees a year.
Sure.
That's more than the average school fees that a child pays in India, right?
Right.
So not many people could afford it, and therefore this essential skill was not accessible. We worked with schools and developed a program for 300 rupees a year. It's 1/100th the cost. And all that we had to do was just use the existing school infrastructure, existing school human resources, and empower them with better tools, so they could then implement the coding and computational program within school, and then the child didn't have to go outside school. So school EdTech actually reduced the cost of access to good programs. Similarly, if you look at traditional smart class players, they would put a clunky system of a projector, a smart board, a CPU, wires. It was unaffordable. So schools would just convert 2-3 of their classes into a smart class, and multimodal learning was not happening everywhere. And just with the use of technology, we could reduce the cost to 1/4. Now all classrooms can be multimodal, which just transforms the quality of learning which happens in school.
And Major Harsh, if I could bring you in here now, because I'd love your view on how the public sector and the private sector can better work in tandem to make technology-based learning not simply more affordable, but more accessible.
The previous speaker said that they are making affordable connectivity, which is a very good thing. And by making that, they are not making pressure on either the school management or the parents. So this kind of thing and these kinds of technology, if they are providing, and there must be many who are ready to do this. So these are the advantages of the technology where we can use it. And I always say this thing, that technology is to empower us and not to overpower us.
Well, by way of closing comments, and I pose this question to all of our panelists, what a child learns in school ultimately becomes the lens for how they interpret the world around them. So how can we in our personal and our professional capacities make learning both more engaging and more exciting for next generation India? And Radhika, I'd love your take first.
Yeah, I think for me, the most, I apologize, I think I look at everything from a startup first lens.
Sure.
So I do come from a bias, but I think the one difference that I see between how I studied as a kid versus how I see now other kids study is just the kind of activities that you do. I think I was taught even something as basic as shapes, numbers, animals, trees, as written text from a book. At best, I was shown pictures. But now we're seeing products where you can kind of scan a flashcard from your parents' phone, and a whole animation appears to show what a dog is and how it's different from a cat, and or what the solar system looks like. So I think just the kind of activities that have been created with the help of technology have been extremely, extremely engaging. That's one. I think second is again, comparing to back when I studied, I think education is always slightly one way from the teacher giving us instruction. I think now we're seeing more and more evolution into, and this is so far been more and again what we call like tier 1A India, and this needs to penetrate across the country as well, is not just the teacher giving me instruction, but me being able to interact with my peer group as well, and not necessarily just the same students who went to the same school as me or who are sitting in the same classroom as me, but being able to interact with someone sitting in maybe Singapore or someone sitting in a rural area of our country, and being able to exchange experiences and ideas and understand everyone else's background as well. So I think also interactive from a personal standpoint, which to my mind helps both kind of your social emotional development as well, because you're learning about different people, you're engaging with people outside of your parents and siblings and teachers, and on more interesting activities. I think the retention of what you learn then is far superior.
The same question to you, Shaheen. I'd love your thoughts.
Just one big idea, and that is partnership. How do we think of our children as partners? How do we ask them, why do you want to be educated? What do you want to learn? And how do you want to learn? My dream is that we see them everywhere, children, alongside us, solving the problem of education. They need to be on councils, they need to be part of school management committees, they need to be on panels, in conferences, but really thinking that our 320 million children are not a mass of people to be educated. They are our partners in this work. And I think all of our actions will shift if we think in that way.
Sumeet, I'll give you the last word before we open it up to question and answer from our audience.
Well, I think we need to recognize that India is really not one country when it comes to where students are. If I just take a broad view, there are three countries. There are the high fee schools where students have a lot of resources and they're doing well for themselves. There are a lot of affordable and low income schools where it is a mix, and then there are a lot of government schools where a lot of low income families go. So while our outcome goals are the same should be same for everyone, their starting point is so different that therefore we have to really modulate and customize our approaches so that we give each child the right ladder to climb to eventually get to the right place. Right? So that I think is one thing that from a policy and implementation standpoint, all of us should think about, and we as operators and partners have to keep that in mind. And then the second thing I guess we have to just remember is that technology, like Major Harsh also said, is a means to an end. So when we ask the question, how do we overcome the challenges of technology adoption, I feel that we're asking the wrong question. We should be asking, how do we build whole children in our schools? And then what is the role that technology can play? What is the role that curriculum can play? What is the role that pedagogy can play? And school operations? Because any solution that we develop would be at the intersection of these four disciplines.
Sure.
And we have seen at LEAD that when we put all these four together and create an integrated system, then transformation can happen at scale. But if you just do it piecemeal, then A, it takes too long, and B, the impact is so shallow that you don't get the satisfaction. So I think those were my two big thoughts on how do we think about school transformation, education transformation in the country.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm told that is all that we have time for, but a huge round of applause for all of our panelists. And I believe that the insights that they've shared and the anecdotes that they've shared are of tremendous value. I certainly really feel enriched after this conversation. And with that, our special feature, LEAD presents School EdTech, Solving India's Core Education Problem, partnered by ET now comes to a close. I trust that you found all of the anecdotes shared of value. Thanks for watching.